The Honorable Holomisa.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Honorable Deputy President. A lot of South Africans are finding it difficult to work in the construction, hospitality, and farming industry or sectors because employers are refusing to pay them decent salaries. Instead, they prefer employing illegal foreign nationals and pay them meager salaries whilst working under exploitative conditions. The question, what are the practical policy mechanisms and regulatory instruments envisaged in the proposed national minimum wage, which are intended to enforce its implementation and compliance, stop the exploitation of the illegal immigrants, create equal opportunities, equal job opportunities for all, and restore the dignity of an African worker? Thank you.
The Honorable Deputy President.
One of the issues, Madam Speaker, in crafting a minimum wage is that you don't want to craft a minimum wage that will just remain on the statute books. You want a minimum wage that will be implemented and applied. And in this case, the proposal from the panel is that we should set up an institutional mechanisms that are going to ensure that, one, the minimum wage itself is reviewed from time to time, and two, that we ensure implementation. Now, implementation in the end is going to be the key in ensuring that employers do comply with the minimum wage that will have been set. And we are certain that once the minimum wage is broadly accepted and the application thereof kicks in, we will be able to set up mechanisms of making sure that employers do indeed comply, and if they don't comply, there will be penalties. There will have to be penalties for those employers that do not apply. But I have no doubt that we will find that many employers who are currently represented at the negotiating table by their various associations, we will find that they will comply, because in the negotiations that we are involved in, various business sectors are represented by a number of serious people who we are negotiating with. So they will be sending the message through to them and making sure that they do apply. Now, the other important thing, of course, is that the panel has recommended that there should be an adjustment period, a period that is given to employers to adjust. Those who are paying below the minimum wage should know once agreement has been reached and it is announced that they now have a certain period during which they should adjust, because the panel has suggested that the real implementation time should be 2019, but the negotiating partners at NEDLEC are still going to deliberate on that time period. It may be slightly earlier, or it may be at 2019, and that should give employers sufficient time to adjust themselves and to understand the rules and to know how the regulations are going to be applied. So we are certain that in the main you will find that there will be a good measure of compliance, and where there is no compliance, there will obviously be penalties. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Ollis.
Thank you, Speaker. Deputy President, wage inequality should concern us all in this House. I want to talk to you about the minimum wage for workers in the blanket sector in the textile industry. They're an example of where the Bargaining Council has set the current minimum wage between R11.28 and R13.47 per hour, which is about half of the proposed R20 per hour proposed in the national minimum wage. How does your government intend saving jobs in the textile industry with a one-size-fits-all national minimum wage at R20 per hour? The industry is vulnerable to cheap imports, and they cannot pass on the costs to their customers as a result. Thousands of textile jobs could be lost. But I suppose your government has got a record at losing jobs, 136,000 lost in the last quarter alone. At the end of the day, won't you agree that sectoral minimum wages proposed by the DA will ensure less job losses than a one-size-fits-all national minimum wage as proposed?
The Honourable the Deputy President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Sectoral minimum wages have been in application or in existence in our country for a long time. Whilst they've been in existence, you've had almost 7 million people earning less than 3,500 and living in what we call wage poverty. Whilst they are working, they continue to remain poor. Now, what the minimum wage aims to do, really, in the end, is to lift the earnings of South Africans, but to do so in a very careful manner. To have a wage, say, of 20 Rand an hour, which, yes, could ostensibly be slightly 50% more than the numbers that you have quoted. Now, at the negotiating table, we are mindful, very mindful, of the job losses that could ensue once a national minimum wage is put in place. And we are now saying we should find a way of mitigating the job losses. Now, all over the world, when a minimum wage is set, it is accompanied by job losses. And what then should happen, a responsible government and a responsible nation, be it employers or unions or anyone else, should then ask themselves, what can we do to mitigate the job losses? Now, at the NEDLAC level, we're beginning to deal with that matter. What are we going to do to mitigate these losses? And interestingly, some of the thoughts and the proposals are coming from the employers. The employers are the ones who are saying, right, if we accept this, what should we do, all of us collectively, to mitigate those losses? And interesting proposals are being put on the table. And one of the overarching one, of course, is that we need a period during which employers can adjust. And the period between, say, December of this year and the envisaged by the panel, that is, implementation period in 2019, will give employers sufficient time to adjust their own budgets, to adjust their operations, to envisage a 20 Rand an hour. Now, having done so, the panel has also said there will be exemptions. Exemptions can be applied for businesses that are in distress, sectors that are in distress, will be able, on a evidence-based process, go to the department or to the institution that will be set up and apply for exemptions. They will then be able to put forward their books and say, we want an exemption for such and such a period and all that. Now, all over the world, minimum wages are subject to exemptions. So it's not one size fits all. Yes, we are saying there should be a minimum wage of general application, but having said that, we're also saying there will be sectors of the economy, there will be certain businesses that go through stress from time to time, and those need to be exempted for a certain time period to allow the business to adjust itself. The real matter here is whether South Africa is prepared to continue existing with a whole horde of workers, up to 7 million, in wage poverty. That is the question we should ask ourselves. Is this something that we are prepared to countenance, or are we saying we want to lift the livelihoods of our people? Now, this measure that has been proposed by the panel is aimed at lifting South Africans who are in employment in terms of their wages, and I think we should embrace that. we should not dismiss this measure. It is going to be a very, very radical measure that is going to add a better livelihood to our people. So those who dismiss it obviously are saying to us that we want to have our people continuing to live in wage poverty. And we believe, and the panel believes, that that is not the way to go. We should be going the way of giving our people a better life. And this is where we start, and this is just the beginning to address the poverty and the inequality that exists in our country. Countries that have embraced the minimum wage have seen the livelihoods of their own people go up, and in fact, in other cases, the economy has responded positively to wages that have been lifted. Because as soon as workers start earning higher wages, the money they earn is not put under the mattress. It is money that goes back into the economy. It could result in more jobs being created, more products being put on the table. So I urge all of us as South Africans, let us embrace the notion of a national minimum wage. It is the right thing to do for our people. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Paulsen.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Deputy President, I find it quite ironic that at Castro Memorial you said we must all be like Castro. You must be the last one to speak. The proposal of 20 Rand per hour with some adjustments here and there in 2019 with no gains for workers between now and then. This level will be less or equal to what the sectoral determination would be in any case, should they continue in the current manner. Is the proposal not an extreme compromise like our 1994 negotiated settlement, where we had this violent transition that instead of bringing back the humanity of the majority of the working class, it is once again entrenched the inequality and not done anything to restore the dignity and pay them a real living wage as we proposed in 2014.
Honourable Member, do you have a question? Because your minute is gone.
Of 4,500, which if we had a 9% per annum inflation increase would have been 5,000 Rand by now. So my question, Minister, Deputy President, if you saw it there was, would it not have been better to provide for the dignity of the working class as opposed to entrenching the inequality that exists?
Honourable Deputy President.
Honourable Speaker, thank you very much. Honourable Paulsen, the thing that you should be looking at is that we are sitting at NEDLAC. As you well know, NEDLAC is made up of business, labor, community, and government. Now, I often look at this composition of South Africans as the brain's trust of people who are dealing with economic matters that affect the nation. They are people who are on a daily basis sitting down, crunching numbers, looking at the impact of everything that happens in our country, the budget, including the laws that we pass here. Now, those are the people who I defer to for their wisdom, for their counsel, and for their foresight. Now, they've been given this task of crafting a minimum wage. Now, the figure was proposed by a panel that reviewed the proposals that were made by all these social partners in NEDLAC. Each one of them came with different figures. And the panel then put all these figures together and look at the median wage that could be applied in our country and put a figure on the table. It is not my figure, nor is it your figure. You have a different figure. I may have a different figure, but these are people who are crunching numbers that impact on the lives of people. Now, they've suggested, the panel has suggested 20 Rand an hour. The social partners are going to discuss this. They will arrive at a figure. It may be the same, it may be different, but in the end, we should respect them for having come up with a solution that begins to address the issue of wage inequality in our country. Now, they are no longer just talking in the wind. They are dealing with a real figure that is on the table, a figure that is going to impact on the lives of 7 million people, Honorable Paulson. 7 million people will be impacted by this. Should it have been at 4,500? Of course, it could well have been. But at the same time, the panel says if you peg it that high, then you are going to lose many more jobs, because the issue of job loss is real. We should realize that it's not a smokescreen or it's not just a rumor. It will happen. And therefore, the partners in NEDLAC are trying to have a balance between having too high a wage and losing jobs, or a balance between having a reasonably pegged wage and save a lot of jobs, but lift up to 7 million people out of wage inequality. This amount, in the end, is not a living wage. I think we should disabuse the notions that people may have that this is a living wage. It is not a living wage. Many of our people earn slave wages, and this is a minimum. This is the floor below which no one in South Africa should earn. In the end, what it calls various sectors of our community on is to try to move the wage up. Trade unions, for instance, they now have a task. They must negotiate wages that will go beyond living wage, wages that will give our people a better life. So this should be seen as a beginning. It should be seen as forming a foundation to enable our people to earn a better wage. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Yengeni.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Deputy President, there are people out there who are saying that the 3.5 is too little. And as we were going around the country doing public hearings, there were figures that were thrown to us like 12.5 as a national minimum wage. Some were saying 5,000, some were saying 700, or 7,000. What I want to know, or what I want the DP to explain to our people who are listening to you today, how did you get to that 3.5? What aspects have been considered by the panel to come to that amount, not to 12, not to 5, not to 4? Definitely, there are issues that have been considered. Remember that also there are people who are saying if national minimum wage is implemented, it will lead to unemployment. So all those issues, I would think that as the panel was considering the amount, they were taken into consideration. Thank you.
The Honorable Deputy President.
Thank you, Honorable
Deputy
Speaker.
Sorry, Madam Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Steenhuisen.
Madam Speaker, is it parliamentary for somebody to put a question to a member of the executive when they themselves don't even live by those conditions?
No, Honorable.
It's 3,500 Rand, not 350 Rand. And I think it's hypocrisy of its worst order for a member to do that in this House.